What's he going to do to move that needle? So my dialogue with that business person is going to be much more bottom line oriented. I'm going to help that person understand that by treating your employees with respect, by giving your managers the skills they need to manage more effectively, what you're going to do is you're going to improve the level of engagement of the employees because they feel more valued. So engagement goes up and turnover goes down.
Are you looking to improve your sales skills without compromising your values? Welcome to Sales Made Easy, a podcast for business and personal growth. Join Harry Spaight, author of Selling with Dignity, your formula for life-changing sales results, as he hosts sales experts and business owners who share their journeys of personal growth and business success without resorting to pushy sales tactics. Now, here's your host, Harry.
So, Mike O'Neill, what is the good word? How's business going these days?
Harry, it's good to speak with you. It's been a little while, and I'm a big fan of yours. We're recording this in April, and I'm happy to say that business is good and it's even looking even brighter. Just very pleased that folks who I have been speaking with have come back and said, Mike, let's figure out how to do business together. So I feel very blessed.
Oh, I love it. So, this is just one of those things that's where people typically in business, they go through the ups and downs, the valleys, the peaks, whatever you want to call them. But it's a beautiful thing when people resurface, right? When you've had conversations and over time you're developing the trust and relationships and they come back in the picture. So, talk to me a little bit about that. What kind of relationship building do you do in your business, Mike? And maybe before we get there, what is it you're actually doing these days? Is it coaching? Is it HR? Is it manage or helping management? So give us a little quick rundown of that. Maybe we start there.
I'd be happy to. Let me give you a little bit of background, Harry. As you know, I spent 20 plus years in corporate HR. I went to work for a small company that kept growing and growing and growing. At the time I left that company, it was Fortune 500. I
Wow.
was leading a large HR team supporting 12,000 plus employees all over the country. So what I really understand is how to build HR out to support fast growing companies. And I enjoyed that, did that for a long time, ended up working for two Fortune 500 companies in that role. For the last probably 10 plus years, I've taken that HR expertise and I've tried to shift it to those companies that don't have the luxury of a large HR team. They're running lean and mean. They've got to get the job done. So I've been targeting small to mid-sized businesses that are wanting to grow and they need help in doing that. That help could be in the form of come alongside HR and helping them shore up whatever they're doing. But more often than not, what it means is they have leaders in place, people they promoted from within. But the thing I keep seeing, Harry, is they struggle with one problem. And this is so frustrating to all leaders and business owners. And it's kind of referred to as people problems.
Mm.
Now, what are people problems? It varies by the organization, but oftentimes it's those people problems that are hurting their profits and slowing their growth. So, what most typically happens is the way I'm able to help businesses most kind of fall into two areas: training and coaching. On the training side, it's working with the supervisors and above on making sure they're comfortable in their role as leaders. And we pay particular attention to how do you deal with those who you manage in a way that gives the employees a sense that they're really valued. So you're really trying to focus on those people skills. The
Yeah.
other area is
Okay.
coaching, and coaching could be one on one in teams, but they kind of complement each other, working on very specific behaviors that they would like to work on to improve their game.
Beautiful. So, even though you may not think of that as being sales, man, that is selling, isn't it? Right? When you're trying to bring parties together and mediate and show the strengths of someone that may not be visible to someone else. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going on. So, when you think about people, this naturally ties in with sales because it's all about people in sales. And, I've heard it over the years that our business would prosper if we just didn't have people problems, or if it just wasn't for the people, but the people also bring in the business. So it's kind of the paradox of that. So when you're working with companies and they're dealing with these challenges with people, can I ask what are some of the typical things that come up that are challenges in dealing with people per se?
Sure. I'm gonna go back to a comment you made a moment ago, and that is when I was wearing my corporate HR hat, HR is a tough profession to be in because companies almost sometimes view them as a necessary evil.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is if you're really going to have a seat at the table, at the senior leadership table, you've got to have credibility. And if you're going to have credibility, you've got to understand the business that you're supporting. To understand the business you're supporting, you're in essence finding ways that you can support that business. You're selling your services to internal customers. So I kind of view that I have always been in sales, even before I started my own business, because I'm selling my services and they have a choice. They could ignore me and my team in HR, or they can embrace. And so I kind of view, if you're looking at that standpoint, I've always been selling. Now,
absolutely.
if I put the hat on of a business owner trying to go out and help companies, what is it they need most? More often than not, it starts with trust because they're allowing me and my team to come into their organization and deal with highly sensitive matters. So, relationship building is paramount because they have to sense that not only do I know what I'm doing, but they can trust me.
Mm,
And trust is something that it's hard to put a finger on it. But if they sense, this person knows what he's doing, and I can trust that he's going to help and not mess things up, that is the starting point. So for me, selling starts with establishing trust. And for me, selling continues with really understanding the challenges they're dealing with. And it could very well be that their highest priority, challenge wise, are things that I can't help them with. And if not, I need to help them find a solution to that problem. So I try to go about what I do, quote, selling, not by necessarily selling, but first building rapport, establish trust, and really understand what are the things that they are wrestling with most.
wow, it's great. And so you're looking at this as the sale is really a long-term process, right? Because you have to build the trust. That doesn't happen in one or two conversations. There's got to be huge risk involved from the buyer's mind, is because it'd be a big investment. Number one, if it doesn't work, it's a wasted investment. And then if it goes the wrong direction, where people that must happen occasionally with some businesses, that they feel like they took made a bad decision, things went the wrong direction in your industry. So with all of that risk, how is it that you can build the rapport and trust? I mean, what are some of the things that you do?
Well, in my line of work, the decision makers kind of fall into two categories. It's the business owner or the key leader. And if they have an HR department, it's whoever heads up HR. So the first degree of trust that I usually have to gain is that of the HR person. And that is they need to see me not necessarily as a threat to them.
Mm,
They need to see that I'm there to support them. And they need to have a sense that that by working with them, I'm going to help them be more successful. But I'm an outsider, and therefore proof is in the pudding. So I look at HR is they are usually part of the decision, but if they don't feel that I can come alongside and help them and their team first, I won't get much further. If I'm going through HR, it starts with that. If I'm going to the business owner, most business owners and business leaders are more focused on how is Mike going to impact my bottom line? What's he going to do to move that needle? So my dialogue with that business person is going to be much more bottom line oriented. I'm going to help that person understand that by treating your employees with respect, by giving your managers the skills they need to manage more effectively, what you're going to do is you're going to improve the level of engagement of the employees because they feel more valued. So engagement goes up and turnover goes down. And it's gotten so hard in today's environment to find good people. I would argue more emphasis needs to be placed on keeping your folks. And the reason you need to put particular emphasis on supervisory attention is because in the eye of the typical employee, their boss is the company. It's not their boss's boss's boss. It's them. And when that awareness takes place and you have supervisors who pick up on that and they strive to understand the employees that they're managing and that they're different and they tailor their leadership style accordingly, what you get are much better outcomes. Higher productivity, higher engagement, lower turnover would be some example.
Hello, it's Harry. Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying this show, would you please take a moment to leave a review and maybe even share it with your friends? That way more people can find us, and we certainly appreciate that. Now, back to the show. Yeah. What would you say is normal as far as the longevity of employees these days? I mean, are people looking at, because of the turnover, is it average? Is there a target where you're saying this is a good number of people stay for 2 years or 4 years? Does that even come up at all?
Oh, it comes up a great deal. I'm working with a client right now who is struggling with this very topic. So the answer to your question is, I'm a member of the baby boomer generation.
Okay.
As a baby boomer, I kind of pride myself that I only have worked for a small number of companies. You know, my average tenure probably is 10 to 12 years. In today's environment, with the generations coming into the workplace, it's not 10 or 12 years. It might be 10 or 12 months. It literally has gotten that short. That they are coming and they're leaving much, much faster if you can't really give them a sense that what they're doing is valued, that what the company is doing is important, and it's making a difference in the world. That's particularly true with the younger generations. But what I'm also finding, Harry, is that even finding people has gotten hard. I'm working with a client right now whose recruiting efforts is so stymied by what is referred to as ghosting. They line up people for an interview, have all the managers lined up, and the applicant doesn't even show. And it gets worse. They don't even show for the interviews, but then they do the interview, they make the job offer, they look forward to them coming in on a Monday morning if they're meeting in person, and they don't show. And that's so frustrating. So to answer your question, there's no doubt. The sense of loyalty has plummeted because they have such choices. The unemployment rate is at an all-time low here in the United States. And the stigma of jumping from job to job has been erased in large part due to COVID. So many people made changes during the COVID period that employers are kind of discounting movement during that period, and they don't penalize folks who made moves or multiple moves during that period.
Wow. So what would you say is the solution to that problem where, I mean, it sounds bleak to say the least, but what is it that you can help a business owner to see the bright side, that this isn't all doom and gloom?
I think it goes back to stressing the importance of taking care of the folks that you currently have. Now, you can make this exact same statement when it comes to sales. It's far easier to keep a client than it is to get a client. And the things you do to keep a client apply to keeping employees. But it really starts with don't take any client for granted. Don't take an employee for granted. Clients want to feel that they're special. And what makes them feel special might be different from client to client. Well, guess what? Employees are the exact same way. And so the parallel between selling and getting business and keeping business apply to what I do, and that is finding employees and keeping employees.
Absolutely. It's such a great connection there. So with with the turnover there is in business, and sometimes business owners get frustrated when they lose clients. I was just speaking to one the other day. He says, I cannot believe I lost that account. And I just asked about churn. And the person looked at me and he did not have the experience from understanding win, lose, and churn that is often understood in corporate business. So he says, so talk to me about this churn. And I said, it's just a natural thing that some companies, there's nobody that keeps 100% of their accounts. People do decide to leave for other reasons. They've got a family member in the business, their finances change. There's all kinds of reasons why people change. But I love what you just said, is that you're viewing your employees as clients or as customers. And just as you wouldn't want to take your client for granted, you really shouldn't take your employee for granted. So what happens a lot in sales, because of the stress of numbers, right? That we need to write business every month and, exceed goals and so forth as to what whoever, if it's shareholders or if it's business owner, if the CFO are putting out these numbers. And then the sales leader could look at their sales reps, their clients, right? And start mistreating them by just, saying you need to sell, and just by speaking to them differently than they would a customer or a client is going to put that sales rep in a position where they might start looking for greener pastures. The same has got to be true in just any environment in the workforce where, the analogy works, right? You've got to treat your employee like they're your client.
I view you as the expert in sales. I really enjoy your book. I have a copy. By the way, I realized I didn't have an autographed copy. I got to get you to autograph my copy.
All right. Happy to do that.
But just the notion of selling with dignity is something that I kind of like to work back into our conversation, because who doesn't want to feel that they've been treated with a sense of dignity? And I don't know if this speaks to what you were asking a moment ago, Perry, but let me just kind of give you an example. And that is, you're a sales expert. I'm more of a kind of a people expert, but the parallels are uncanny. A sales manager who treats every salesperson the exact same way probably is not going to be an effective sales manager. Why? Because we're all different. Some sales folks are motivated by one thing and one thing alone, and that's how much money can I earn. Other sales folks are really drawn to the sense of camaraderie of the people they get to work with. Other salespeople are really love the fact they're working for a company that's doing great in the world. And the list goes on. But a sales manager who doesn't really understand that, who doesn't tailor their way of interacting to sometimes even rewarding their sales organization, they're missing an opportunity.
Yeah, so true. The thought of some owners might say, well, my sales reps get paid enough. And so they don't really want contests. They don't want trips and so forth. But salespeople generally want those types of things. It's a feel good thing. It doesn't cost a ton of money. and it can keep people around for years, right? If they feel good about what they're doing and they feel rewarded. And then others, like you mentioned, want to be part of something bigger. So, you've got cultures. So I always crack up at this is that any company division, everyone is talking about working as a team. When it comes to the sales team, they pit each other. They pit the teammates against each other
A great point.
with survival of the fittest. Who is the top person on the team, and they just reward the top dog all the time. And then now you've got this feeling of, the bottom 80%, right? The bottom 80% doesn't feel like part of the team. And so I completely disagree with that mentality because I think it's completely dysfunctional.
Mm.
Is that if you have a great team, everyone is working towards a project or a goal, something that, you can set out in front of them. So it might be a team goal. It might be, a trip for everybody. Everybody gets the part. Not that everyone gets the trophy, but you can set things up where the top performers get a little bit more and so forth. So, what's your thought about that as far as running a sales team and setting this survival of the fittest, everyone's against each other, and expect that team to be successful?
I don't really characterize myself as a sales expert, but here's what I have found. Companies will invite me in because they are looking at their sales compensation and they're wondering, is it meeting a need? And the point that you just made is that there's a tendency to keep the sales compensation too simple. It may be a base plus commission. The commission might be tied back to profitability, but the point you just made is spot on. More often than not, it's an individual mechanism. And if one of the goals of the company, which should be for all companies, is that we want to build camaraderie. We want the sales organization to work well with the support organization, that we're in this together. We want sales folks to collaborate. If there's no reward for working alongside others or working cooperatively with others, then they're not going to do it because they're going to assume it's not important. So where I typically get involved is when if the goal of the company is to maybe simplify this notion of the top 20% get all the attention, you don't want to reward mediocrity. I'm not saying that at all, but you kind of step back and say, what are you trying to build here? What is the culture you're trying to foster? And when you begin looking at these things and you begin modifying your sales compensation, and I'm not talking about just the base, I'm talking about the variable comp. I'm talking about what matters to them. The rewards might be different depending on the individual. You mentioned the trips. For some people, that is the best reward you can possibly offer. You take your spouse on a trip. For others, that is not motivating.
Right.
It might be something else. So what I would say is the ability and willingness to adapt to the individual and the ability and willingness to step in and say, what is it we're trying to accomplish? Yes, we have sales goals, but what additional goals are we trying to accomplish? And how do we reinforce that? Compensation is one way. Other ways is how do you foster collaboration? In what ways are you communicating with the sales organization in a way that they feel part of? One of the complaints I hear about sales is they're the hot dogs out there making all the money, but they oftentimes feel like they're left out. And if that's the case, make sure you're including them in things. And so what it really requires is a willingness to customize, if that's the right term. You've got to still maintain a sense of fairness in what you're doing, but if you're willing to adapt what you're doing to the circumstance and to the individual, I can't help but think it's going to have payoff for the organization and the people within it.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole thing about collaboration, there's definitely opportunities for people who may not be really strong in hitting their numbers. I mean, most people, I mean, the vast majority of businesses out there, their sales reps are not hitting their targets.
Hmm.
So what do you do with that, right? You could just keep constantly having turnover and bringing people on and letting people go and then bringing people up to speed, and may take 6 to 12 months. And then you just said the turnover rate is, and it's tough to keep people for a year. Well, that's why a lot of sales organizations have 70 or 80% turnover. A number of them have this massively high turnover rate. I won't say a lot. So this whole thing that you're talking about, Mike, I just love, is that you can really work at helping people collaborate within a team. Maybe the ones who are not as strong, pairing them up with the stronger ones. Are there things that they can do to help the stronger be even better, to bring in more revenue for the company? That can be done in sales. Same can be true in other departments, right? Where you're pairing up someone who's really skilled at something, someone is newer, instead of just saying, you're out on an island, go figure it out, matching people together, being aware of the strengths of some and saying, look, does this person over here have some strengths that we could utilize and really help build the overall unit? So thoughts on that?
Yeah, Harry, I mentioned earlier, I look to you as having sales expertise, and that is working with a sales organization and sales leaders. I don't characterize myself with that expertise, but what I have found working with sales leaders, the topics that we're talking about are not unique to sales leaders. Leaders have to be able to do what I'm describing if they're going to be effective, not just sales leaders. But I threw out lots of options. Sometimes throwing out lots of options confuse. What I would like to stress is that in my one-on-one work with leaders, I try to help them get real clear on specific behaviors that they want to work on personally. It's what they want to work on, not what I tell them to work on. But when they begin working on those behaviors, it's not unusual that one of the behaviors they want to work on is to be better attuned to the needs of the people they lead.
Mm.
And what that means is they have to be aware that there are differences. And it starts with self-awareness. Do they really know how God made them?
Right.
And if they do, it doesn't mean that their way is the best way, but if they can understand themselves, then they're a better position to begin understanding those that they lead. And when you have that awareness, these things I've been talking about, the tweaks are just that. There may be minor tweaks that can just make all the difference to give individuals a sense that they're part of something bigger.
Yeah, it's great. And this awareness starting with yourself, why start with yourself? What's the reasoning behind that?
There's a term battered around called emotional intelligence. And I think it's largely misunderstood. But what I would say is the people who are viewed as having high emotional intelligence are people who have the ability to do what is it we're describing. And it isn't necessarily a God-given ability. It's oftentimes something that has to be honed. So what I would say is the most successful leaders that I get a chance to work with, more often or not, work on that. For those unwilling and take the position it's my way or the highway, they'll get their numbers. They'll browbeat and get the numbers, whatever it might be, sales or otherwise, but it comes at a high price. Is you've got employees who are not happy to be there. There's a sense of competitiveness amongst the coworkers. The sense of belonging kind of goes out the window. So what I try to do in my work one-on-one with leaders and leadership teams is try to point out that it's in their best interest to do these things. If they will do the things we're talking about, they're going to experience more success as an organization and more success as an individual.
I totally agree. This emotional intelligence, Mike, is this something that most executives are thinking about is this kind of like, oh yeah,
Mm,
I should be thinking about
mhm.
it? Is it kind of a wake up when they're having conversations with you on this?
I don't remember my phone ringing and someone say, "Hey, Mike, I want to improve my emotional intelligence." It doesn't happen. You know what's also interesting, Harry? My phone doesn't ring and they say, "Mike, I want to coach."
Hmm.
Usually the conversation is, "Mike, I want to improve my effectiveness as a leader. I want to improve the effectiveness of our organization. I'm looking for ways to do that. What are your thoughts?" So, what I would say to you is no, people don't wake up saying, I want to improve my EQ score, as they call it. But what they find is when they begin to understand themselves, that their willingness to apply that learning to what they do at work and at home. And we've not
Mm,
talked about that. But why do we automatically assume that there's this wall between work and home? So, more often than not, in my coaching experience, the kinds of things that we're working on, it could very well be personal. It's relationships within the family that they want to improve, or they want to do other kinds of things to regain a sense of balance. So I try to step back and help clients look at things more holistically. And what they want to work on is what they decide to work on. But it's not unusual that the things they want to work on is to gain a greater sense of getting the right things done and to be more purposeful in life and to make a difference in the life of others.
yeah, wonderful. This is really a conversation we could have for some time, but it's so dead on. Is that when people are looking for results, I can hear people saying, "Well, what does this have to do with me hitting numbers? What is me being nice in the morning and treating Sally with a smile and giving her the proverbial pat on the back? What does that have to do with numbers?" And yet, I'm sure you would agree it has everything to do with numbers.
That it does.
Right. So, yeah, great stuff. So, Mike, I just want to touch on this. You have been involved in small businesses that turned into large businesses, and then you went out on your own. What was that transition like? Did you expect that you were going to turn into a sales and marketing expert, so to speak, wink, wink, when you started your own thing? Or did you kind of just expect that, hey, people are going to hire me because of all this great experience? What was that journey like for you?
I'm still on that journey, and I'd be less than candid if I didn't say it can be very hard at times. The biggest challenge for me as an HR professional is I just assumed that if I hung my shingle out, people would be a path to my door. And what I'm realizing is you have to go out and make known how you help people. But when you are owning your own business, you've got to do everything. And so what I've tried to do is step back and in my own little way say, well, I'm the CEO of me. And as the CEO of me, what I'm trying to do is find ways to be a good boss.
Mm,
And what that means is I'm trying to do a better job of practicing what I'm preaching. I'm trying to take care of myself physically, mentally, spiritually. I'm trying to look for a sense of roundedness and sense of purpose. And at the same time, Harry, I have learned that I've also got to be vulnerable with my clients,
mm,
particularly in coaching, because I've experienced many of the things that they have experienced. I've had some very hard lessons. Why would I hide that? Why
right.
would I try to appear that I've got everything figured out? I don't. Nobody does. But if I can be real with a client, be it a consulting client, a coaching client, but be real, it makes me more relatable. And I guess what I would say is that's probably the biggest lesson I have learned is, you've got a presence out there on social media. And if it looks picture perfect, it ain't. Embrace it. And I have at least found that I've been trying to do that more recently. And what that has led to just a conversation gets off to a better start because I'm not going to roll. I'm just being me. I'm trying to see if I can help.
Yeah.
I hopefully will ask good questions. And I'm willing to sometimes push the envelope in my questions, particularly in a coaching situation.
Mm.
And that is, I don't know if this was going to make sense, Harry, but in my coaching role, if I'm doing my job right, I'm listening far more than I'm talking, but I'm asking insightful questions. If I'm doing this via Zoom, I can see the wheels start to turn. Or they'll say, I never thought of that. But I have to be prepared to be bold. I need to be able to, when appropriate, show them things that they can't see because of the blinders we put on ourselves. And at times, tell them things that no one else dares tell them. And that means being bold. And bold means you may even, I'll be polite, you may piss off your client because of your boldness. But that's what they're paying me to do.
Mm-hmm.
They're paying me to be fully present and to do what I can do to help them, whatever that would be. So the biggest lesson I have learned is don't play it safe. In the corporate world, it seems as if many people are doing that very thing,
Playing it safe.
playing it safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And playing it safe doesn't really move the needle
No.
when you're working
Yeah.
with individuals and with teams. Sometimes you have to be bolder. You've got to set objectives. So I hope my comments is making sense.
Oh, perfect. Mike,
You're-
I'd hire you as a major account sales rep. Honestly, you're so consultative. I mean, but asking all of these questions, right? Listening more than speaking, asking the difficult questions, not accepting mediocrity, right? Sometimes you have to be a little bit straightforward.
Mhm.
And if you have those relationships with your clients, right, you can get away with that, right? You're saying, well, they hire, the same is true in sales, right? When you have this great relationship, and I don't buy into this line that the customer is always right, because then, you're accepting mediocrity at times, right? Sometimes you have to call people out. You do it politely, respectfully, but nonetheless. So I love the conversation. I definitely want to talk more about vulnerability and awareness, emotional intelligence. God, I love those topics, but they're so important in sales, absolutely incredibly important in business. And hey, get this, in your personal life. And the fact that you said what you said about separating business from personal life, it's like, why be great at your business comrades and then go home and be a jerk, right? It just makes no sense. So, final thoughts, Mike, about where people can find you and what what are the types of people you like to help?
I'll be happy to. My name again is Mike O'Neill, and you could find me one on LinkedIn. The name of my business is Bench Builders. So I try to help organizations improve the strength of its management bench. But you can find me on the website at bench-builders.com or on LinkedIn. I'm now looking at my thing. I really just changed this, but it reads Mike O'Neill, father of 3 sons, 3 grandsons, and I believe in 3 things: faith, family, and restoring the joy of growing businesses. So that describes me in literally in one sentence. So if there's anybody out there that I can be helpful to, please, I'd love to talk to them. Just reach out and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you would provide some value long before they hire you. So great stuff. The power of 3, Mike O'Neill, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining the show. And I hope you have an awesome day and keep building that bench builder business, Mike.
Thank you, Harry.
Great stuff.